Why do New Zealanders worship the very ground they walk on? On today's menu. With about 10,000 miles of rugged, unspoiled coastline and relative isolation from the rest of the world, New Zealand is the perfect place for growing fresh, organic food. Farm-raised venison roaming free on New Zealand's fertile pastures.
What we want to do is live off our own land.
From one of New Zealand's smallest dairy farms, fresh, handcrafted goat cheese.
I think we feed and look after our goats probably better than we do ourselves.
An Auckland beekeeper makes honey as nature intended.
New Zealand really does have the purest honey in the world.
At Craggy Range Winery, single vineyard excellence from unlikely soil.
90% of the volume of the soil is occupied by stones.
The Maori name for New Zealand is the land of the long white cloud, meaning there's a reason why it is green and it rains. And it rains quite a bit up here, which means that you can grow anything. And if you look out here, this is the fruit and vegetable bowl, not just for New Zealand, but for Southeast Asia.
New Zealand has some of the strictest environmental standards in the world, and living off the land is an integral part of being a Kiwi. 300 miles from Auckland in rural Gisborne, Case and Kay Whiteman pride themselves on running a sustainable farm that has been in the family for nearly a century.
The farm's called Knapdale. It was my granddad called it Knapdale from the area that he came from in Scotland.
So what you're seeing here is a permaculture garden, and this here is called Jerusalem artichokes.
We are growing a lot of our fruit, and from that point of view, we're not original. We're just doing like the older folk have done for many generations.
That is one of the reasons why we like living in New Zealand. Just the abundance of fruit is just incredible.
The farm hasn't seen any fertilizer for 26 years. We use the bees to fertilize the clover, and the clover fixes then the nitrogen, and the nitrogen makes the grass grow, and that makes our animals happy.
This is Hagrid.
We had a calf born, and that calf got adopted by the goose as its new husband, so to say. And now it is 6 years later, and there is this big Highland steer, and the goose is still with him. They've been together now for 6 years.
New calves are not allowed to get close to Hamish. The goose is very protective about her new husband.
Grazing in open pastures and free from steroids that can toughen muscle, Knapdale Farm produces some of the region's best game, surprisingly both lean and tender.
That's my girl. That's my girl. We put a lot of thought into what food the deer are getting and when. As Case said, there are certain times of the year that they need more food.
So they were born in December last year, and by October, November, they would have reached weight that we send them off to the works, and then they come back vacuum packed, and that's when they get consumed. Or we take them to the farmers market as well. Every Saturday I go to the farmers market, and then we sell salami and our surplus product.
You know, I really like to know where my food comes from, and I think, you know, there are more farmers markets now just because of that, because people are questioning where their food comes from. I prefer to cook venison in big pieces rather than cutting it into steaks, because venison's got no fat in it at all and it dries out really, really easily. So you have to make sure that you're cooking it medium rare, otherwise it's just dry and unpalatable. I serve it on an apple and kumara roasting. Kumara is the Māori name for a sweet potato. I'm just going to have a little look at it. As I say, I don't really want to overdo it. I don't think I want to be cooking that too much more actually. Looks about right.
Going to the very basic, what we want to do is live off our own land. In a nutshell, that's what we want to do. And anything that the land provides, we will see as an opportunity to sustain us.
We didn't really choose a goat because we fancied a goat. We chose a goat because we wanted our own milk supply. We wanted to be self-sufficient, and we thought cows were a bit big.
Unmanageable.
Yes.
Kiwis understand that size isn't everything. Just outside of Auckland is Crescent Dairy Farm, where Jan and John Walters keep a herd of 25 goats and produce only 1 round of goat cheese a day. Though one of the smallest dairy farms in the country, they won the 2007 Champion of Cheese Award, naming their goat cheese the best in New Zealand.
There are always the pushy ones and the more reluctant ones. And on our list on the wall here of all the names, we write them down in the order that they come in for milking.
Always the same 3, and always in the same position. I had been selling milk for a long time from the farm here, and people had always said to us they'd been to France and tried goat cheese, did we make it? And we just always said no. Then when we had a bit more time to sort of fiddle about with things, we thought we'd have a go at making cheese. Right, we have to pasteurise the milk. We get it to 65 degrees, then we have to hold it at 65 degrees for half an hour. We then chill it down to 35 degrees and are ready to start the cheese making process. I don't think we really actually set out thinking, well, now we'll be cheese makers. It just happened because we had the milk and because people were interested. We did it. You can tell it's going to be a nice cheese. The milk feels lovely and thick. It is the winter milk. It's almost got a creaminess to it. So this will make a farmhouse cheese, and we're there. Now the next stage, now that we've got it down to 35 degrees, is to add the starter. This is a very basic cheese starter. It's a freeze-dried culture, and it's just about 1/3 of a teaspoon. And that sits on the milk for an hour. If we just left it like this, nothing would happen. When we add the rennet, you get that magical transformation within a couple of hours from flowing milk to a solid, it'll look like a jelly. That will now sit for about 2 3/4 hours.
Every day I go down and feed the bucks. We don't have much contact with them, so it's good to have this regular routine. You know, keeps them friendly with us.
I think we feed and look after our goats probably better than we do ourselves. If it's a cold night, you always make sure they're bedded down with hay and warm, because you get the product in the end. The taste of the milk will be sweet and nutty if the goat is healthy. If the goat's stressed out or sick or cold, your product's going to fail. Right, 2.5 hours later, we should have a nice curd. So I now cut this into cubes. You can see it's a beautiful firm curd. You can see what the consistency's like. That's a lovely curd. Right, this is the best bit. Isn't that magic to think that was milk this morning? And now you've got something you can actually pick up. In a minute I'll be able to hold it in my hand.
So this is the way that customers come in to buy our products, our milk, yogurt and cheese. We never know what to call it really. It's not really a shop because we don't attend it, we don't serve people. It's all run on an honesty self-service system. So customers leave their money through the slot in the wall.
This cheese was made 2 days ago. So it's spent 1 day sitting in its mould and then overnight sitting in brine. That then goes onto a tray and into the cellar. That slurry on top is really good. It means I'll end up with a smooth rind. We just use these tiles as a very light press on them. It just pushes it all down so that when we open the cheese eventually it's got a nice smooth curd inside. It is very much a New Zealand way of doing things, and the New Zealand way of you just find things around you to suit what you want to do. You know, you don't go off and buy what you need, you make it.
And I think Kiwis generally are very adaptable.
Yeah,
I mean, the number of systems that we've gone through with the goats, that we try something, it doesn't work, so we try something else.
Well, it's nice. Yeah, it smells like it's going to be stronger, but it's not. It's quite pungent.
The initial smell is the attraction, isn't it? You know, you sort of think, yes, it makes you expectant of what you're going to taste.
If you're a cheese person.
Yes.
For me personally, to be able at the end of the day to have a cheese I can hold in my hand and then nurture it on through to a cheese that people are going to want to buy and use in their restaurants, it's just totally satisfying. It's all I've ever wanted to do without knowing it.
Bees are an amazing part of our ecosystem and a very, very important part of our food chain. Most pollination is actually achieved by honeybees. My name's Maureen Maxwell and I'm a beekeeper from New Zealand.
Based in Auckland, Bees Online founder Maureen Maxwell is New Zealand's leading producer of organic single-flower honeys. With a background as a chef and more than 20 years in the wine industry, Maxwell has developed a line of products far beyond the sweet stuff you find in the supermarket. Rivaling wine in complexity and flavor, her honey varietals are sought out by chefs worldwide.
Honey is a product that man can't recreate. We need the honeybees to do that for us. The honeybees, absolutely amazing. A little worker bee, she can visit as many as 200 flowers every time she leaves the hive. And in her entire lifetime, she may produce only 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey. What I specialise in here is premium monofloral honeys. Monofloral honey is gathered from one particular flower, so you're actually getting the pure essence, the pure flavour from one particular flower. This is a fully certified Manuka honey. Manuka is a lovely white flower that comes through in the early spring. Manuka is a very dark, very herbaceous mineral honey. New Zealand beekeepers do not use antibiotics in any of our hives. Now this is pretty amazing on the global marketplace. Most countries, even if you're buying organic honey, they are feeding those bees cane sugar syrup laced with antibiotics. So it's a major difference. New Zealand really does have the purest and finest honey in the world. At Bees Online, we say we produce estate bottled honey. We're bottling some Rata honey, which is totally at the other end of the taste scale. Rata is a very fruity, a very floral honey. This has gone through what we call a creaming process, which is very, very gently stirring. So we create a creamed, smooth honey. Honey is like wine in that every harvest is different. Each year, depending on the weather, we will get quite different crops, and each region produces quite different honey for me. Getting that real creamy texture that's coming through there. And the Rata, although it's a very pale honey, has a very distinct flavour all of its own. It's very sweet, fabulous with all the feminine flavours, so things like lavender and vanilla and white chocolate and cream. So it's quite a luxurious honey. When I first tasted the difference between fresh honey and that sweet stuff that you get in the supermarket was quite enormous. I'd describe it as one of those aha moments. Bees Online has what has become a very well-known destination cafe. Originally I put this in so that when people were out tasting the honey, they would have somewhere to have a cup of coffee or a glass of wine. But it very soon became important to me to tell the story of the honey, how to use it and all the different varieties. So I'm just going to sear the lamb rump now. We use a little bit of horopito, which is a native pepper that comes from the bark of a pepper tree. I've dribbled a little bit of the honegar over that, which is a locally produced red wine vinegar that we blend with Manuka honey. As a chef, it was an amazing discovery to discover the whole spectrum of flavours that honey presented. No longer did I look at a recipe and see honey just as a sweetener. I've got some nice little pickling onions there, some of these absolutely fabulous heritage carrots that are grown locally. Finish that off with a wee crumble of macadamias and herbs and just the tiniest little weeny bit chili honey over on the top of that. Chili honey's just got that nice little bit of pepper that goes with that. Pop that in the oven. As a mother, as a chef, I love to be able to give people the purest food that we can possibly give them. Now, you've been working so hard, but come and grab this and have something to eat.
Oh, beautiful.
I like the native flavours that come through.
Really taste the chili honey too.
Yeah, a little bit of chili just lifts it quite nicely, doesn't it? Honey just brings that natural sweetness out in the lamb, doesn't it? Honey is an embodiment of our environment, the sunshine, the soil, and everything that makes up that wonderful food.
150 years ago, this piece of land was a river. The river flowed through it, and it had done so for about 15 or 20,000 years, dumping a big, deep bed of gravel. That land was useless until a few brave souls decided to plant a few vines there. And what they found, because of its low elevation, stony soils, and away from the sea breeze, that these Merlot and Cabernet and Syrah vines that they planted ripened 3 weeks earlier than a vineyard less than a mile down the road. That was simply because of the location. So it became this unique little story.
2 hours south in the Hawke's Bay region, Steve Smith knows that making excellent wine is all about what's in the ground. Producing single vineyard estate wines from New Zealand's distinctive rocky soils, his Craggy Range winery is now one of the country's most respected producers of Merlot, Cabernet Franc, and Syrah.
This is the only place in the world where the boundary of the district is determined according to the soil type. So it's unique, but it also gives a real heritage to the wine. So this is the gimlet gravels. This is the old riverbed. This bed of gravel will go down more than 100 feet. Probably about 90% of the volume of the soil is occupied by stones. What that means is the balance that is left is a little bit of silt, a little bit of clay, and that's where the nutrition for the vine comes. If we want to make great Syrah or great Merlot or great Cabernet Franc, we need to have warm sites. So these stones will get quite warm on a hot summer's day, and so that extra heat means that the vine's sort of living with its own electric blanket. So it's this extra warmth that allows us to ripen these varieties fully, and it's really the only part of New Zealand that can do this. This is our Kidnappers Vineyard. It's named after Cape Kidnappers, which is in the background here. The most obvious thing about this vineyard is that it is very close to the sea. So the sea breeze keeps it nice and cool, and that is important for making sure that the grapes have got real intensity of fruit character. Our story is a story of single vineyard and a story of land. The single vineyard philosophy is really the philosophy of the French, and they have a fantastic word that they call terroir, and it's about the feeling that the quality and character of any wine comes from a place, it comes from a piece of land. It's not just the domain of the French. We also have an opportunity to do that in New Zealand. One of the great things about Craggy Range is that the property is a little like some of the Bordeaux properties, where there's a whole collection of buildings and people on the same site. And I'm very lucky I get to live here, and working and living on the same place. Wine becomes part of your everyday life because you're surrounded by it. The whole site overlooks a river called the Tuki River. That's Craggy Range there. Interesting part of New Zealand history in Craggy Range, because obviously sheep are very much part of New Zealand, and one of our famous sheep breeds was actually bred on that property. So it's a little bit of a farming legacy, Craggy Range. Now it's a different type of farming, it's wine. One of the unique things that we have at Craigu is that we have 3 of us involved in the winemaking. And while we're all responsible for different wines in the portfolio, we taste each other's wines, we talk about them. It's interesting as you look from the Kidnappers through to the Seven Poplars and to the Gimlet Gravels wine, you see the warmer sites.
I love the Seven Poplars components we've got, and I see great similarities, just that steely element to the wine.
For me, when you go to the Gravels one, it immediately has an extra layer of sort of depth of complexity.
You can see I think a really distinctive difference just in those sites within one region, which tells a story of the piece of land. You need to have a collection of great palates and people with a sort of a combined resolve to make something great. And I love the land. I mean, I was brought up on the land, and I love the opportunity to express what New Zealand does. I guess the ambition is when you're overseas and you have one of the other great producers of the world come up to you and taste your wines, and if they're French, they should have, they give a little raise of the eyebrows and get a surprise. And that's what we're about at the moment. We're about surprising people and telling people that, hey, New Zealand is not just a country of Sauvignon Blanc, it is a country of some fantastic parcels of land, some fantastic wines. Think of it like a little France, and then you get the picture of New Zealand.
Forensic science takes us one step closer to understanding the strange killings in the animal kingdom. The brand new series of Predator CSI, Wednesday on the National Geographic Channel.